How many of you are on Facebook? Make a show of hands. How many of you are on LinkedIn? How many of you are on Instagram? How many of you are on free platforms at the same time? Okay, imagine if the world looked different. Imagine if, let's say, if you lived in Russia, you can only be on Instagram, but not on, let's say, Pinterest or LinkedIn. Or if you lived in France, you can only be on Facebook, but not on LinkedIn. Or imagine if you live in Italy. Wait for it. You can only be on MySpace. Not only is MySpace the only option available, but regardless if you want to use it or not use it, you are forced to use it and you are forced to pay for it. And failure to pay for it might land you in jail. Imagine that sort of world. Obviously, that's completely unacceptable. If that was the case, we would all instantly become pirates and install VPNs and what have you, right? But that is the case in one area of our lives, and that's governance service providers. We're over 7 billion people on Earth, yet the total amount of nation states are only around 200, depending on how you count it. Imagine a world where there would be only 200 websites, for instance. Not normal, if you ask me. So I've been battling these questions my entire life because I'm a second-generation immigrant from different countries. I spent my whole life moving between different countries, and I've been working in war zones, assisting to build and overthrow governments. So I've always asked myself, how is it possible that we only have such limited options and we're forced to pay for those options whether we want the services or not? But I'm not just the sort of crazy who have ideas, right? I'm the kind of crazy who is insane enough to actually implement it. So in 2014, I started BitNation, the world's first virtual nation providing actual governance services. In essence, what BitNation is a blockchain jurisdiction. So we started in 2014, and at that time, the blockchain technology was still in its early stage. There were not a lot of so-called blockchain 2.0 applications at the time. So we started basically testing the technology, like what can this do for us, right? So as I assume everyone in this room know, the blockchain, the technology underpinning Bitcoin and other digital currencies, is an immutable public ledger. So October 5, 2014, we did the world's first marriage on the blockchain. Then we did the first world citizenship idea in partnership with the World Crypto Network and Chrysalis. Then we did the first land title in Ghana, a parking lot, boringly enough. And in 2015, we built a public notary together with the Estonia e-residency program, which is used by thousands of people around the world. And then, not to brag, we also won the UNESCO Netexplo award for our refugee program, where people could get emergency IDs on the blockchain. The award was previously held by Spotify and Twitter and others. Okay, I'm bragging a little bit, just a little bit. But here's my personal favorite. Susanne, that's my nephew, with the awesome name, Susanne Human Wall Tempelhof. Beat that if you can. So he was the first baby listed on the blockchain. But what's, so how, you might ask yourself, like, how does this all work then? Okay, registering things, that's one thing, right? But, being a kind of glorified notary service isn't really where we're going with this technology. what we're doing is building a jurisdiction. Why? What's the point of building a jurisdiction? So if you look at current nation states today, we are used to nation states providing everything between heaven and earth, from education to roads to you name it. But if you take another look at what a nation state really is, or what a government is basically, if you take it down to like a night watchman state model and just go down to the core, to the basics of it, the nation state is basically all about providing security and jurisdiction, right? And security and jurisdiction are increasingly becoming the same thing today as more and more of assets become digital. So if we want to really outcompete the nation state for offering better, more cost-efficient, more free services, then we have to go for the belly of the beast sort of saying, right? So we need to build a jurisdiction that outcompetes existing jurisdictions. But what exactly is a jurisdiction then? And what is specifically a blockchain jurisdiction? So basically, it consists of three parts. The ability to voluntarily enter into an agreement with two or more consenting parties, the ability to resolve disputes attached to that agreement, and the ability to enforce that agreement. So in a post-nation-state world, if someone does something criminal, you will go to jail, most likely, right? And obviously, virtual jurisdictions are not likely to build jails anytime soon, so that's not a very plausible enforcement mechanism. So instead, we need another sort of enforcement. I like to call it the carrot versus the stick analogy. So the nation-state employs the stick in the sense that they put people in jail, and instead we build a reputation system where people get financially incentivized and rewarded through complying to contracts they have voluntarily entered into. So here you can see Lucy. That's our AI distributing reputation, because we don't want reputation to be won by popularity or attention. We want it to be strictly meritocratic. And this is not a novel idea. I mean, millions of people every day are using eBay, Airbnb, etc., where reputation successfully act as the incentive model and enforcement mechanism of contracts. What is the similarity between these two? So, a Jew and someone from Anonymous, right? If you look at them, you might think that they are kind of at the polar opposite of the political spectrum. But when you look at it more closely, however, actually they are both living in virtual communities where their morals and rules often overrule the physical jurisdiction they are living within, the nation state. And this is just one of very many examples. There are over 4,000 special economic zones in the world who also enjoys their own jurisdictions to different degrees. There is Burning Man, for instance, where over 70,000 people comes to practice their own form of temporary opt-in governance. And this is coming more and more everywhere in the world, right? We are experimenting with governance, and everyone is doing it consciously or unconsciously every day. In fact, anarchy is all around us, in the sense that we often voluntarily agree to do things. Like I have voluntarily agreed to stand on the stage, and you have voluntarily agreed to be part of the audience. That is anarchy in action. People consenting without the use of a nation state to use force or coercion. And it's possible, we do it every single day. But nation states are also realizing this, right? So there are what I would like to call personally smart nations. like, for instance, the Estonia residency program, or other nations like Switzerland, Singapore, United Arab Emirates, Liechtenstein, etc., following suit, Malta, Gibraltar, are adopting blockchain technology, and not just adopting the technology itself to improve its own governance services, but to offer their governance services on a global market for governance services. And of course, at BitNation, we always take things a little bit too far, just an inch too far. So we are actually now offering passports as well. Not a joke. I can say more about that in another talk. But what's the point with all of this, right? What is the point of creating your own nation? What's the point of having a market, a global market for competing governance services? Why can't we just continue with what we have right now, right? Okay, so here's the point. The point is that even though we have seen a recent upsurge over the last couple of years of nationalism, we are de facto moving to a post-nation-state world, whether we want it or not, whatever we think about that, because of global communication, global transportation, etc. So we have two choices. We here in this room, in this audience, in this generation, we have the ability to shape that post-nation-state reality. And it could be shaped in two ways. Either we can go to a more centralized model, let's say something UN-like, right, a United Nations-like, where there is a one-fit-all model for the entire world, and everyone has to follow the same rules, same code of law, the same lifestyle, the same what have you, which, in my opinion, is most likely to lead to perpetual war, because people just don't like to be told by some bureaucratic entity what to do or how to live, right? Or there is the version that I propose, that BitNation proposes, which is a world of millions or billions of competing nations, where everyone can choose how to live, what values they embrace, what culture they want. I started my own nation, and so can you. Everyone in this audience can start their own nation, and you should. We're all Satoshi Nakamoto now.